Hey everyone, welcome to the first episode of the PromoMinds podcast interview style, where I bring in entrepreneurs from all different areas and to share some insights and some of the challenges that they've gone through and just share some lessons. Today we have Ryan, the logistics monk, who I was featured on his podcast I guess a couple months ago now. My girlfriend Clarissa, she was featured about a year ago. We've kind of built this relationship over the last year, and I'm really excited to bring him on. He's got a lot of things going on. He's really knowledgeable in the logistics space. He's an avid learner and thoroughly believes in personal development. He's studied from Jay Shetty, and that's where kind of the monk portion comes into, but we'll get into that. He's also an avid animal lover, as he's adopted several dogs over the years. When he's not working, doing his shows throughout the weekday, on the weekends, he's usually running a booth or something to support animals in need. And he's the host of the Logistics Monk podcast. He's a co-host of Sales Chatter, which talks about logistics and sales and all that great stuff. He's also launching a software company called Bridgr, which we'll get into during this interview. Now, I will give you a heads up and say that the audio with the original recording of this podcast was not very good on my end, but Ryan's came through really clear. So as long as you can, kind of put up with my little tidbits, which there aren't very many, the show should still be enjoyable. I'm actually re-recording the intro for that reason. So without further ado, let's get into the show.
Yeah, good morning. Well, yeah, good afternoon. Thank you so much, Steve, for those kind words. It's interesting to hear all these really nice things to hear about yourself because usually I'm the one doing that for other people coming on our show and things like that. But same thing back, man. All the love that you and Clarissa have shown in the short time that we've kind of met, and I can't wait for us to finally meet in person one day. But thank you for having me on your podcast, and really looking forward to see where this goes.
Absolutely. So I want to jump right into things here. Now, you call yourself the logistics monk. Could you provide the audience a little background on where that comes from?
Yeah, of course. So for everyone who's watching out there, I got my start in logistics maybe about 5, 6 years ago, just by mistake. I applied for a job on Indeed, and I well, first enough, I got booked for an interview, and then when I looked up the location, I saw like a Prime America office was in there, so I thought it was a scam. So I canceled that meeting, and then I waited a couple weeks, and then I did some more research, and I saw the website was legit, and then I signed up. I went to the interview, crushed it, became a logistics coordinator, so I was working in operations, and then I saw the amount of money that people were making in sales, so I made the transition. So that's the logistics part. I've been in logistics. I eat, breathe, and sleep logistics. When we think about it, everything, look around you, everything touches a truck, with the exception of humans. So there's always going to be an industry, and there's always going to be a need for it. The monk part actually just recently came. I think just kind of obviously people are going to say, the relation over to like Jay Shetty with his book, Think Like a Monk and things like that. And my wife and I went to go see his 8 Rules of Love show in Toronto, and just the vibes that he's kind of giving out and things like that. I was like, you know what? I really like that monk. And for myself, it's something that I live too. You mentioned obviously being a musician and everything like that. My faith is number one to me. And for me to be able to like give back and truly live my truth, as you've met me and anybody who kind of meets with me online or meets me in person, I want there to be like, the same person you talk to me online is the same person you meet in person, and kind of be that person giving. So the monk part is really about giving. It's not self-proclaimed. I didn't go to a Buddhist monk, like wherever, like where they kind of like practice all that stuff. So we'll see how that future goes, but it's just that combination of both, like wanting to help people and try to give a little bit of wisdom, whatever I kind of learned in my life.
Now, you mentioned when you were transitioning into logistics, like was what did you do before that? Was that your first job, or was there something that you were doing before that?
Yeah, so the short story is that sucks to say this, but this is my truth. My parents separated when I was I think it was like 15, 16, and I grew up with like amazing parents. Both parents are really, really amazing, but we went from like a double income home to like having everything we wanted in life to basically my mom really busting her ass. Realistically, she was working at Walmart and then supporting two kids and a home, and we kind of like moved from place to place. And the only reason why I say that is that I actually wasn't able to finish college. I was in first year, I think, college. So I'm actually a college dropout, because I literally had to choose, hey, I got to work and help my mom and do things like that. So I decided to work, and then I went from job to job. I worked in retail. And before I got into logistics, I was working for one of the biggest telecom companies in the call center for about 6 or 7 years, doing different customer service roles, doing different teaching. I actually ran like their sales boot camp, things like that. So when I got into logistics, I was just kind of feeling like I waste it's hard to say this, but I look at my life in that time period that I was there for that company. I was like, wow, that's 7 years that I kind of wasted for one company. Maybe I wasn't really making much, making under like $40,000 a year, and I was doing decent, but it wasn't like the future that I really really wanted. And like I said, I would like to say that I picked logistics on purpose, but I definitely didn't. I was just kind of resume bombing and seeing what stuck, and then thankfully, logistics found me. Sorry.
More from the PromoMinds podcast coming up shortly. PromoMinds. Promote your brand, transform your business. You had mentioned this that you worked at the call center for 7 years or several years, and you were making under 40 grand. But from that, were there any transferable skills that you were able to take away and build upon for your future career?
100%. And I even think, as funny as it sounds, my first job when I was 15 was McDonald's. And a lot of the skills that I actually learned at McDonald's was transferable. But coming back to the call center, I feel like I can read a customer, or I can read a situation, within like seconds of hearing what it is. And the reason why is that we used to kind of like deal with irate customers, but I kind of always kind of let them like talk for a little bit, but then try to figure out, okay, what's the real reason why, And realistically, it was always kind of like, hey, I got overcharged, or I got disconnected, or some kind of thing. But people are always gonna have that emotion that they have, and I think emotional selling, emotional marketing is one of the biggest things that I've kind of gone to logistics. And for me, is understand people as people, like not like an actual number. The other thing is working in teams. The teams that we worked with was like 15 to 20 people. In logistics, this actually could be a lonely road, right? Some logistics reps are doing everything. Like they're sourcing the customer itself, they're sourcing the carriers, which are the trucking companies. They're building all these loads and doing all that stuff. But then you get burnt out from doing that. So I think being able to work within a team and not understand like you don't need to necessarily be a leader at all time, always kind of just be a student of the game. So yeah, for sure, I think every job that I had, I even worked in a factory for 2 days, and I just couldn't cut it because I didn't want to do it anymore. But I learned lessons from there as well. So I think everything, like Kobe Bryant once said, like if you use the world as a playground, you'll never ever get bored in life, and that's what I try to view life as, really.
That's a great quote. And it really puts things into perspective too. Like Eric Thomas, he talks about how you could hate what you're doing, but as long as you could take one thing away, just there might be one thing that you need to learn, and that could save your life. And so I think you might have felt like you wasted a lot of time doing mediocre jobs and whatnot, but the fact that you're able to look at things with having a learning mentality, like anything that you do, just it's a playground, right?
I couldn't agree more. Sorry, yeah, I was just gonna say I couldn't agree more with that because playing in the sandbox is, yes, I probably look at that time as a different time, and even with ourselves, right? But one thing I'm learning as I kind of grow in my life is that like there's really no coincidences in life. I think everything really does happen a reason, like a specific reason for example. So even though I look at those things, we look at like different times. Maybe we had like a breakup with like a relationship, or that business venture that didn't work out. Well, it's like, what did you learn, and what are you going to do to not really repeat the mistake ever again? I kind of think about that.
Yeah, there's an excellent book on this subject. It's called "Sometimes You Win, Sometimes You Learn," and it's by John Maxwell. Have you read that book at all?
No, I haven't read that book, but I'm definitely gonna be adding it, to our book list that we kind of get into. So no, I think that is perfect. I'm definitely gonna write that down.
Hey, one quick podcast recommendation here before we get back to the show. I highly suggest checking out Sales Chatter. They talk about sales, logistics, personal growth, have some really cool guests on, and they're just great guys to listen to. So definitely check out Sales Chatter on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. All right, back to the show. So keeping on that topic of logistics, you had mentioned that, logistics is so massive, it really runs the entire economy, right? So I'm wondering, what have been the biggest lessons that you've been able to take away um, from the field of logistics, and any lessons you could pass along?
Yeah, I've learned quite a bit of lessons in this industry, and the one thing I think is that you get to really design the life that you really want in logistics. Like I think sales in general, it doesn't matter. Well, first and foremost, I think everybody in any job, they're selling regardless. Even when we're talking to our partners, we're constantly selling them on the idea, hey, you want to go get pizza tonight? Do you want to get tacos? Or you're like, I always feel like you're selling. So somebody who says like, hey, I don't sell, you got to really take a couple steps backwards and realize that you're selling without actually knowing that you're selling, because there is that preconceived notion that, that greasy salesman at used car lot. But, when it comes to logistics, the one thing I've learned is that you can work with people that you actually truly want to work with, people that you actually get along with. You don't have to work with anybody and everybody. That was one thing that like I had this one account at a previous place in logistics, and the money was amazing. I put the money over like the relationship, because the person was just a horrible person to deal with. And what I realized was that I get to pick and choose. So the customers that I work with right now, or even the prospects I decide to go after, they have to fill my requirements in order for me to kind of be like, okay, well, not necessarily valuable, but like I want to work with you, right? Like I want to be able to text with people like, hey, how did you watch the basketball game last night? Like I'm a big basketball fan, as you mentioned in the intro, that like I'm a big animal lover. Some people, like, I'll scan for that, if they work like they have dogs themselves. And I've sent out emails to be creative a bit, where my subject line is saying, hey, I want to pet your dog, and kind of have like a genuine conversation like there. So I think that was one of the big lessons. The second thing is, treat people the way that you really really want to be treated, and but do that 10 times more. Like treat them a lot better, because I'm nothing without my team. Like I said, I'm not a one man shop. So I can be this great person, but like if I oversell or underdeliver, then it's still, you're only as good as your last shipment when it comes to it. So that is definitely two lessons, and we'll go for three because I believe in the power of threes. But the third one I've kind of learned is that no matter what company you kind of go to, every company has strengths and weaknesses, but it's really the same job you're doing at the end of the day. So even if like a company comes, like you're doing really well at a good company, and another company recruits and be like, hey, we'll give you another $15,000 to $20,000 more and stuff like that, and it's just like, yeah, that'll be awesome. But the actual day to day operations of doing business is exactly the same. So is it really worth it at the end of the day? Would you want to lose your customers and things like that? So yeah, those are definitely three lessons I've learned in logistics, and I'm continuing to learn. I think this is one industry that it's constantly changing, and it's what you kind of feed yourself into, the news that you want to actually portray yourself as.
Awesome. Now, you said that when you first broke into logistics, you were a logistics coordinator, correct?
Yeah, so that was the role, logistics coordinator. So that was operations. So just so for everybody who's watching doesn't know what kind of happens, you got your salesperson. That's the person who brings in the business. They cold call, they prospect, all this stuff, and then once they actually get that customer and they got an order. So I know we're in Ontario here. So let's say you had a lane from, let's say, Toronto to Montreal, and you need to find a truck for that. That would go to logistics coordinator, in order for them to actually find that truck and then have a difference in margin. So let's say you charge the customer $800 and you get a truck for $700. That $100 is the margin. It's not $800 is not the revenue. It's that $100 basically what you get paid on.
So when you saw just how much money was in the sales aspect of logistics and you decided to transition to that, how did you go about establishing yourself when you first started out? What did that look like?
Of course. So when I switched over to sales, I'm a big family person, so it's not a nepotism or anything like that. So I basically negotiated at the last that same place when I went to sales, is that my sister, she got laid off from her previous job. So what I did was, like, I talked to my boss. I was like, hey, why don't I have my sister come in? let her be the logistics coordinator, and then I'll go into sales. And he was like, oh yeah, let's make it happen. So that actually happened. So she actually took over my role. And this was like the third company I worked out with my sister throughout the years in our lives. But the big transition the first thing I did was like literally talk to my boss. It wasn't more of a like a logistics coordinator role, operations. It was like sales to sales. Ask him what he did. And the one thing I loved about him was that he had one of those old school phones, the Avaya phones that you actually dial out, and his like the numbers that show on them, they were all faded out because he used to call so much, right? And the ways that he kind of told me, the one thing that really stuck with me is like, hey man, you're late on your electricity bill. Pick up the phone and make some calls. Your girlfriend just left you. Pick up the phone and make some calls. Your birthday, you're short on cash. Pick up the phone and make some calls. So the one thing I learned where it was just strictly a volume thing. And I feel like either people or like the universe kind of like blesses people who put in that work anyways, because I was busting my ass, and it's not easy. Like sales is really hard. I want that for everybody to understand that, like, it is really hard. But my boss would kind of feed me accounts as well and kind of be like, hey, I used to work on this one maybe 5-6 years ago, why don't you give them a call and things like that. So I had a great environment. I didn't have training, and that's what we talk about a lot, that some newer reps, they lack that. But I did have the support, so it was open door. I can go ask him, and he actually helped me like close a couple of my first accounts in order to see how the process looks like.
So when I first started in the pool industry, I was like basically the shadow of one of my old bosses. Like I did not leave his side. uh, Well, I barely left his side, right? And I think that's a very underrated approach that people kind of take for granted, right? They have someone who's been there to seek that mentorship and to learn from someone who has actually done what you want to do. I think there's tremendous value in that. Just being a sponge, it's soaking it up.
Well, one thing you learn, Steve, is that like people want, let's say like you've established yourself in something, people want to help people. Like, and I feel like people like maybe it's that ego that kind of gets involved with it. I'm sorry for cutting you off from there, but it's just like look at your boss as well, right? Your boss did all the work. He climbed up all those stairs and things like that, and he's like, why wouldn't I want to share that with somebody and help somebody be successful? That people get trapped in that scarcity mindset. But full transparency, I've never met anybody who has that scarcity mindset. Everybody who's like been a high performer, and no matter what they did, they were always willing to share and have that conversation. So it's up to you to really ask. Like I always kind of believe, like, closed mouths don't get fed, right? So it's like if you don't ask, then the answer will always be no.
Now, recently, you and your co-host Dan Deegan, you guys are launching a new software product. I believe just in the logistics industry, or mainly in the logistics industry. Could you maybe tell the audience a little about it and where you came up with the idea?
Yeah, of course. So Bridgr, it's a CRM. It's made by logistics reps for logistics reps, and it's really believing in the follow up. So for anybody who's working in sales out there, or let's make it for anybody who doesn't work in sales out there, a place to track our leads is called CRM, which is customer relationship management. It's basically where you put all your leads, you do all your follow ups, and you basically it's an electronic way instead of using like a pen and paper or Excel spreadsheets, which a lot of people still do. So this idea came, I want to say, about 16, 17 months ago. So this was all in the planning. We decided that we're going to build this from the beginning. So it's myself, Damon Graywall, who's the owner of Centurion Trucking in British Columbia, and then Lisa and Chad Petty, two amazing people for American Group, and they're all like within logistics. Like this had to be, in order for this to work, you had to have some skin in the game and understand how logistics and CRMs work. So it kind of just started with brainstorming. If you had a CRM, like we've had like Salesforce out there, we have HubSpot, we got Monday, but none of these are built for logistics sales reps. Like none of these pushes the needle forward for them. Right. So what we decided was like, hey, we're going to build this, and we build this outright. And then what kind of slowed us down was like Dan, who's basically our founder. He got cancer, and he's going through his own journey and things like that. And thankfully, everything's good with him. He's all good to go. But we did launch about, I want to say about 2-3 months ago. It is an all-in solution. We provide lead gen. We provide automation within sequences. We have a lot of features, but I don't really like to sell on the features. I like to kind of sell like, hey, what are you looking for in a system? and how can we get that out to you? So we just integrated SendSpark, which is an amazing video website where you can basically send videos to your customers and prospects and anybody that you want to if you're feeling a little bit comfortable, and we teach you how to do that. So they're actually integrating our system. So it's a new venture. For us, it's for me, it's brand new because I've always sold service. That's what logistics is, that relationship service. But this is actually selling like a transactional sale. Like I'm actually selling software. So for me right now, it is like understanding like the skills. I know you're a big Alex Hormozy guy as well. So I kind of been following all his stuff that he's kind of doing and things like that, and understanding that, if we really want to be where we really want to be, the product, we can't just say, oh, the product is the product. We actually have to sell that value to somebody. And what is value? Well, it's going to be different from person to person.
That makes sense. So is this just aimed at people that strictly do logistics, or could it also apply for people who they might work in a business that logistics isn't their main thing, but it's a key component for, shipping product out?
Yeah, 100%. So it is meant for like really anyone in the logistics space who's actually doing this, who's selling to somebody. So like I was telling like earlier, we all sell to somebody within logistics. There's certain things in there, certain features, like we can do like rate sheets in terms of like proposals. So yeah, it works for anybody. More I would say more aimed at the sales rep who's like feeling like they're a little bit capped. They've using all these CRMs and they're not having fun with it. They're not able to find leads. We're the only CRM that actually has lead generation built in. So you want to find your next customer, let's say at LG or like Samsung, you can go into our lead gen within Bridgr and search for that contact, send them an email, put them in a sequence, and reach out to them. So our mission really is that we've kind of started with this is to really help 10,000 reps with hitting a million in GP, which is gross profit, in less than 12 months. So our mission is really focused on the sales reps, but I can see a function later on. Like the idea that I had right away when I saw this, I was like, this would be so great for like real estate agents, being able to find prospects and like reach out with them, and then, having those conversations. And if, let's say, if you're going to go take a drive somewhere, you can line up some prospects and talk to them that way. So a CRM is a CRM for what it is at the end of the day, but we are focusing on the logistics sales rep for now.
Hey, if you're struggling with trying to develop a more positive mindset, one book I would recommend checking out would be John Maxwell's Sometimes You Win, Sometimes You Learn. It's one of those books that changes the perspective on failures and when you lose and all the good things that you can take away from every experience. So that's Sometimes You Win, Sometimes You Learn by John Maxwell. Check it out. All right, let's get back to the show. Now, I want to do a little plug here because your business partner, co-host, Dan Deegan, you had him on your podcast, The Logistics Monk, like a couple months ago. And his story is just absolutely incredible. It's inspiring. So I would highly recommend everyone goes and checks out specifically that episode. Like it was incredible. It's hearing his battle with cancer and going through it all, amazing.
Thank you for that. But the most important one, though, I know you plugged Dan, but hey, we gotta say, Steve, you were on my show as well. So, everybody go check out that as well. I think it was a great episode and I got to learn about you more. And I think that's what the intention is, right? We have that sanctuary for basically a safe zone for everyone telling stories. So anybody, it's not aimed at a certain niche and it's not aimed at anything else. So no, everybody go check out Steve's episode first, after you check out this one and all the amazing episodes that you've had already.
Well, thank you. As it relates to Bridgr, and you might answer this, but maybe I missed it. What led to the initial creation of it?
Yeah, so when we were Bridger itself, so Dan, like I said, is the founder of Bridger. He came up to me, he's like, Ryan, I got this really, really cool idea and I want to talk about it. And Dan and I, we have that friendship. So a little bit of context for that. When I came over to the company that I'm working with, I want to say about 3-4 years ago, Dan's a sales trainer. And within, I think, the first 2 months of me being there, they all invited everybody to kind of come to the sales training. And at that point in my life, Steve, I had to build my book of business from zero because we have like non-competes and non-solicits in our industry. So I was literally at the point that I couldn't take my book of business from my previous place. So I was like, okay, I need to figure out some strategies and kind of get this up there. So went to that training, and then Dan and I hit it off. I've been through a couple of, so like, he's went from like mentor to friend to now business partner, things like that. So we've always had that communication where we talked every single day. So he reached out to me. He's like, hey, I got this idea. I really want to make this happen. And we got on the call, and then we talked about it. And I was like, this, at first I was like, this is such a really, really cool thing. I was like really interested to see how would this come together. And then the people that I was mentioning, hey, I was like, look, Dan, you can't do this by yourself. And he was like, yeah, of course, we definitely can't. So the people that he decided to bring in, and I'm a big believer in, having that inner circle of people who are just thriving, like Damon, Lisa, Chad. They're such amazing people. So when all five of us got together and we put this together, we're like, okay, well, we're not going to let our minds say no, or we're not going to make excuses for it. What are the next steps? And then we started working on it, started developing the software with India. And then we kind of saw, there was progresses, and it wasn't perfect, there'd be glitches and things like that. And it's ongoing. And that's what the conversation was always kind of looking like. Okay, we're all in the situation. Even Dan got like like a tattoo on him that says I'm all in, or something like that. And it's just a testament to like the business partners that we have around us. It's just so amazing to work with these collaborative minds and hearing different, like, we meet like once or twice every week, and just to hear, okay, guys, we're thinking about this marketing piece, and just to hear the opinions of everybody, it's like, holy crap, I did not think about that. Right. So like, it's kind of like one of those things where you kind of say, if you want to run fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. Right. So our team is amazing. So with that conversation was like, it was many conversations over the days and things like that, and it's still going on right now.
Awesome. Now, I guess a little side topic here. You had mentioned that when you switch companies, you had this non-compete, right? And you had to start from zero. Was that, did you have the same approach starting each time, like starting from zero, having to, just dial on the phone? Or were you able to implement some other strategies as you progressed?
Yeah, great question. I love that. So at that point, I've already built two books of business, the first company and then the second company. So when I came to the third company, technically I could have went back after the customers that I did at the first company, because that non-compete was over. Especially if you like move companies and things like that, that's kind of like a little bit of a workaround. But I decided that I didn't want to do that. I kind of wanted to do this from fresh. So I learned what to listen for, and the type of, so the first company that I dealt with, I was just completely brand new. So I was taking anybody and everybody. Like, I had customers in who did tires, so like customers who did like balsamic vinaigrette, or the customers who did like forming for like concrete forms and things like that. So I did a little bit anything and everything. When I got to the second company, I figured that I was doing a little bit more food related, food and beverage. And then when I got to the third company that I'm working with right now, I decided that I kind of want to do a little bit of construction, a little bit things that move like right away and has a scarcity mindset to it, in terms of like, hey, I got this product and it cannot sit on my dock, right? Because like one of the biggest things is, like, look at baked beans, for example, right? They come canned. Let's call a spade a spade. Those could sit on a dock like until like the customer gets like the cheapest price, because it has no shelf life, right? Like, like you buy you can of baked beans, you look at it, it's like, yeah, it's gonna expire in like 3 years, right? So there's time. But then you look at something that, hey, like some car auto parts that could literally hold down lines at like amazing like automobile factories and things like that. So I look for those things that need to move. Like, some of the cool things I moved right now is just like, we're actually doing some lifeboats for like the I think it's the aquatic for part of like the government and things like that. I forget, the search and rescue, I believe it is. So those things need to move, from there. So to coming back to your question, in terms of like picking different things, it was like, I loved it coming to this third company because they were relatively brand new and grassroots. So that means all accounts were open and available to me. So I could have really gone after anything that I wanted to. At the second company, they had over 60 sales reps. You go into Salesforce, you type in a company, you're like, yeah, I'm going to go after this company. And then you see that somebody else has it, right? So the strategy that I kind of had was really to come here, hit it hard, go in volume. I'm a big volume person. I know a lot of people will be like, I'd rather have 20 good conversations instead of like dialing 100 and talking to five. Well, I'm a big believer in putting in the reps, like, I can't control how many people are going to pick up the phone, but I can control how many times I pick up the phone. So that's what I really learned in the third job, was like to kind of be more refined in terms of the type of business that I was going after.
That's great. Yeah. You can only control what do you do? Like how many times you pick up?
It's in life though, man. You gotta. It's like you're a runner too, right? So it's just like one of those things you learn. Like you control when you're gonna run, right? You can't control the injuries that you're gonna sustain, but you can control that. Hey, I'm feeling good. Hey, if I wake up today and I feel like an 8, I feel like a 7. I'm gonna run. I'm gonna go do those things. And even with the podcast, like one thing you're gonna get is technical issues. Like it's inevitable. Like your editing is gonna come. The thumbnail is like you're like, oh my god, I wish I did this or this. But as long as you like maintain that, I'm putting in the efforts, I'm putting in the reps, and continuously growing every single time, man, you're always gonna win. So that's how I kind of believe in my life.
Yeah, I know. I actually had a conversation like this on LinkedIn today, and it was in regards to quantity over quality. Like it just makes me think about when I was training for my ultra marathon. I had a obviously I had goals set, but I also included a minimum goal where for the days where I just did not feel like going to the gym or doing some form of workout or exercise, like at the very least, I all I had to do was go to the gym, put on my gym clothes, and walk on the treadmill for 5 minutes. And as long as I did that, I would get a check mark, right? And to me, it seems like the same sort of thing as it relates to phone dialing. Like, as long as you dial the number, even if they don't pick up, still check mark because you still took the action. You still picked up the phone. So, I think if you focus more on building the habits and instilling those habits and not beating yourself up, I think that's really where um, kind of the state of genius is to just habitually build, uh, that habit over time or consistently build it.
Yeah. Well, there's two thoughts you bring up here, Steve, that I want to acknowledge from there. So the first one that I think about is, you're always one call away. You're always one conversation away. You're always one thing away from having the life that you really, really want. And that's why I kind of left. And there was number two is going for the nose. And I've been learning that quite a bit. I've actually been talking to this like really cool marketing guy, the Fearless Marketer. Another plug, check out his YouTube. He's a great guy. His name's Randy. And we've had like I've only met him like maybe 2 weeks ago, and we've just developed such an amazing relationship. And he said that when he was running one of his businesses, he would hire his reps to basically go for no. He'd give them a script, and he would pay them $5. Like, and this was back in the day, so he'd pay them $5 for every no that they got. And he's like, for the first 30 days, there was no uptick in commissions, but then 60 days, everybody was making money. And he's like, it's not like, you're picking up the phone and you're saying, hey, do you want my businesses? No, hang up the phone. Okay, time to collect commission. He's like, no, no, no. The only way you'll get commission is by answering these qualified questions. And if they were a yes, he would transfer over to the closer, and then they would close the business. And it was just a good mindset from there. So even when I'm looking at my calls and things like that, Steve, I'm looking at, let me see if I can go for a no as long as they've qualified. Right now, if I qualify people and still a no, then I'm like, okay, cool. Let me get over to the next person because they might be able to say yes. So you will when you kind of go for the yes and you go for the commission breath with anything that you're kind of selling, people know that. So I go for the nose, and they'll go for like the basically the learning experiences that we get.
Yeah, it takes the pressure off, right? Like you don't approach things as if you have that same sort of sleazy salesman attitude like you had alluded to earlier, right?
Oh, 100%, 100%. And like you said, takes the pressure off, and you get to be yourself. You get to kind of put your foot up, right? And it's just like, if I think a part I'll touch on as well is that I've been working from home for the past like 5, 6 years, right? So even pre-pandemic, I've been working from home. So that atmosphere of being in the office, the first two jobs I worked at was in person. But sometimes when you're in that quote unquote bullpen, when you're in true sales, you have all the people around you, right? So you hear somebody crushing sales, you're like, I'm gonna pick up the phone and make some more calls, right? I want to have that feeling too. But when you're working at home, you got to really motivate yourself. And Steve, I'm not a big fan of you could shout as much affirmations as you want. You could drink as much tea as you want. You can do all these morning routines. You can do all these cold showers and stuff like that. But hey, if you're not going to put in the work, you're not gonna be successful, right? So none of those things. You can listen to pump up music. You can do whatever you want. Do what works for you, but don't let that be the thing. Saying like, I meditated for like 10 minutes today. I'm ready to go, and then you look at it, and then you probably made like 3 calls, and then you got distracted on your phone all day, right? So figure out what your priorities are and work towards them.
Right. So I just have a couple more questions, and then we can wrap this up. But earlier you had given us, one book, but are there three book recommendations that you have for the audience? Just three books, doesn't have to be genre specific.
Yeah, of course. First one comes to head. I like, like I mentioned, I'm a man of faith as well. I think the Bhagavad Gita, even if you're not Hindu or not, it's kind of like our manual of how to live life. Like the learning about duty and things like that. I think everybody should at least give the Bhagavad Gita at least a couple of reads, and we're all going to take different information from it. I think it's just honestly great reads. We're reading right now a lot of. I feel like we're doing a lot of plugs here, but on our show on Fridays we do what do you call it? A book club. So we're actually reading The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. This is my second time reading this, but I read this when I was like 15, 16, I think it was. So it didn't have that impact on me as it does right now. So I think we're on chapter 5 as we're recording this episode right now. So I'm just loving everything about it. So that one. Um, Third one is kind of a tie because Atomic Habits, I've really liked Atomic Habits. However, though, reading Power of Now has kind of really contradicted the things I learned in Atomic Habits. So that's a journey that I'm going on right now. But Sell It Like Sirhan, Ryan Sirhan, $1 million listing. Anybody who watches reality TV is a great real estate agent out in New York. And just to hear his story and his sales strategies and things like that. Yeah, I would definitely say those are my top 4 books. There we go.
I've been tuning in a little bit to the Eckhart Tolle book club there, and just remind me and the listeners, what time does Sales Chatter take place every day or every weekday?
Yeah, of course. We're Monday to Friday, 10:30 a.m. Eastern time on Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, and Twitter. So yeah, if you ever feel free, just type in Sales Chatter on, like I said, on YouTube. LinkedIn is mostly where we kind of see the more interaction, but we do different days every single day. Won't get into too much, but Fridays has really become one of my favorite days where we kind of stop talking logistics, and anybody could follow along. And we do a chapter a week. So even if you didn't read the previous chapter, if you want to kind of come in and join in on the conversation, even Steve, if you want to hop in on one of the days, just read one of the chapters, and then hop on. And we'd love to hear a discussion about it. Because the one thing that I've learned, Steve, is that you and I could read the same 2 pages and we'll have completely different things that we take away from it. So just to have that collaboration is pretty cool.
Absolutely. I find that, if you go back and reread books over and over, that you take away more from them, right? Like you're you're a different person at that point, and you just pick things up that you didn't even realize were in there before, right?
Well, I'm a big fan. Like even when it comes to books and things like that. Like early on in my career, I used to say I didn't really like books because my attention span. So what's really worked for me is that I kind of really cycle through maybe the same like 6 or 7 books. But what's actually worked for me too is weird is that I read 2 books at the same time in terms of like I'm reading this book which is whether you want to call it nonfiction or not, but I'll always read like a fiction book at night because I want my mind to kind of like go away. So I kind of like that like fantasy or like mystery or like kind of thriller or something like that I'm reading. So anybody who's like looking to actually like read more and kind of like have fun with it, pick 2 books. You don't have to read at the exact same time, but pick a schedule, and kind of work with it. But I find fiction before I go to sleep is one of the best things that I've done in my career.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I heard Tim Ferriss talk about this once, where he said that he'll always have a business book and a fiction book on the go. And the fiction book is for nighttime so that, it allows his brain to kind of shut off a little bit and be able to sleep better. Because, if you don't do that, your brain's just going to be going a million miles a minute. And next thing you know, you're going to get a horrible sleep, right?
It really is. It really is. And Steve, you probably agree with this too, is that I'm realizing that a lot of these books that I'm reading these days, they're quoting somebody else, like even though I love Jay Shetty, like he's a great guy and all that stuff, and obviously Monk part of it. But even when I read Think Like a Monk, it's just like, okay, as they said in Bhagavad Gita, or as somebody said, like I was like, what are your true thoughts though? Like what are you trying to? Because I feel like with all these self help books, that's what we kind of get into, or like business books, it's really the same strategy. They're just kind of regurgitating or putting it in a different way. right? Like nothing has really changed from coming from like the past, like from the Greeks and all those things, right? So I think with the books, like it's just regurgitated information. Even when we look at social media and things like that, it's just finding like a million different ways to say the exact same thing. So figure out what works for you and just really kind of roll with it.
For sure. Now, before I let you go, I want to hear more about what you're doing to support animals because, every weekend it seems you're out doing something, you're behind some booth, just giving your support for animals. So what have you got going on?
Yeah, of course, of course. So animal rescue is huge to me. It's by chance. Even logistics. Logistics is the reason why I got my first dog in 2018 or 2019. I'm already forgetting. So he was the reason why I got my first dog. Logistics really was. Anyways, unfortunately he passed. He passed in 2020, and that kind of sent me a journey. And that I've never really been depressed or anything like that in my life. I've never used that word or like that. But that time I was in bad shape. So the one thing I saw was rescue. So ever since then I've been heavily involved in dog rescue, being a voice for the voiceless. I work with different organizations, just trying to raise funds and awareness. I think the next 2 weekends, in 2 weeks actually, on the 16th or 17th, I'll be at the International Center, which is the Pet Expo, the Fall Pet Expo, and we'll be raising funds just to really help dogs, help the neutering and spay and neutering population out there. But anything that we can kind of do, man. If I would give advice to anybody, forget the business, forget everything that's kind of going on in your life. If you can feel the love from like an animal, it's one of the best feelings in the world. So, yeah, everybody, shout out to Bob Barker. Every single year, every single episode, he said spay and neuter your pets, and he was definitely a big advocate for it. So, that's what I love to do. And anytime I can give time backwards, and I got to shout out my wife Kashri, who's my rock, and she's never discouraged me from doing anything that I've wanted to do in my life. She actually encourages it. So yeah, rescue is going to be a part of my life as long as I'm breathing.
The Yeah, R.I.P. Bob Barker. But funny enough, you just triggered or reminded me of something that I wanted to ask you. So one more quick question. Um, who is going to bring down Roman Reigns and well, I guess the bloodlines no more, but who's going to bring down Roman Reigns?
Man, so it's gonna be Cody. Cody's gonna be the one to be that final nail in the coffin. I think I see that because Cody brought Jey Uso. I think we're gonna be looking at next year WrestleMania 40. It's definitely gonna be Cody. I don't want it to be Cody though because like I think Cody's really cool, but I would love it to be main event Jey. I just think for everybody who's watching as a wrestling fan, like it's an amazing time to be a wrestling fan right now. Everybody's like over. You got the Judgment Day, you got Jay, you got Cody, you got Roman. There's so many people who that's over, and then you look at AEW as well, which I'm a big fan of. But to answer your question, I think it's going to be Cody who brings them down, and then hopefully Jay becomes that main event guy because it would suck to kind of see him go to back to like the tag team. But I do see Jay versus his brother at WrestleMania. I think that's, or maybe the Rumble itself, but. It's gonna be Cody Rhodes. He's got to finish that story, as he says, right? So
And I know the Usos have talked about wanting to fight each other at WrestleMania. That's kind of like a dream match of them. So I think it's going to be awesome. Anyways, Ryan, I really appreciate you coming on the podcast and giving us a little more insight into who you are and what you got going on. And it's always cool to connect with you. And I guess right before I let you go here, what's the best way for people to contact you, or how can they stay in touch with you?
yeah, 100%. Well, first and foremost, thank you so much for having me on your show. I'm really appreciative that that you're having me here as your first guest. I could have been the first guest. I could be the last guest. Doesn't matter any way that you feel I would be a fit on here. I'm thankful for the opportunity. And then kudos to you for starting the podcast. I know we've had some conversations, and I'm glad that you're moving forward with it. I'm looking forward to seeing as well with Clarissa. I do enjoy seeing both your content and things like that. So kudos to you both for being amazing people first and foremost. And then for myself, you can find me at the Logistics Monk Instagram, on YouTube as well. The Logistics Monk Show. We air every Monday at 5 p.m. I've been slacking on the last two episodes because I kind of been finding my niche and things like that from there. But check me out, shoot me a follow, and honestly, anybody out there, shoot me a DM, man. I'm always my DMs never go unanswered. So feel free to come and reach out if you got any questions at all. I'm more than happy to help or direct you in the right way.
Well, thanks again, Ryan. And yeah, definitely check him out. And what was the name of that event again on the 16th, 17th?
The Pet Expo, the Fall Pellet Expo at the International Center Mississauga.
Awesome. Definitely check that out as well. Well, thank you so much, Ryan. And once again, we'll talk soon here. And as we wrap up the first inaugural podcast for the PromoMinds podcast interview series, I want to thank everyone for tuning in. Definitely want to give a big shout out to Ryan for once again hopping on here and helping me out, especially running things in the background and taking over that way when I just kind of jumped in and had to learn some more skills, I guess. So I'll be coming at you with new episodes of the Promo Minds podcast every Thursday. And I think what I'll do for a little bit is drop a couple podcasts each week. And one will be interview style, one will be just an independent one to actually share specific tricks and tips and all that good stuff. So, yeah, I really appreciate you guys tuning in. And if you have any comments, questions, or even if you would like to be featured on the podcast, maybe one of the interview series, definitely reach out. You can send me an email at promominds@gmail.com, and I'll throw up the ending segment, which will spell it out for you as well. All right. Until next time, take care. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of PromoMinds podcast. I'm Steve Leslie, and if you want help crafting your message or sharing your story, feel free to reach out. I'd love to help. Love coming up with ideas, and we can have a nice chat. So reach out to promominds@gmail.com and I'll respond. Take care.